All right, welcome everyone. I'm Mike with the Odd Stuff Podcast, and today we got a few reports that we're going to go over out of Quartz Hill area in the Antelope Valley and further west towards Gorman area, the Neenack and Antelope Acres area. I think it's a little bit further than that because some of the reports come up from 280th West, which that's out there. So we're going to go over a couple of those reports. So these reports that we're going to go over, excuse me, come out of the BFRO, so the Bigfoot Research Organization. Excuse me, Bigfoot Field Research Organization. And if those of you that don't know what that is, that's a website where you could go and put in your experiences that you had with Bigfoot, Sasquatch, um, and have them either come out and go over them with you or actually, you know, investigate the surrounding areas. Now, I think with them, I'm not sure. It might depend on how recent the sighting is, or whether if they're going to go to that area or not. But a lot of the accounts that happen out here in LA County, um, a gentleman by the name of Richard Hucklebridge, he's the investigator usually that's attached to these investigations that are here in this area. There, I said his name. Last show I didn't say it, but I said it now. It's out there. He knows. But reading these reports, he does a very good job of going over, um, what he thinks, or questioning the witnesses to try to make sure that there's not any flaws in there. And then some of the cases he'll go out and investigate, and just to make sure that it's an area and that the person said it is, and they'll go over accounts with him. Not so much with the LA County stuff, because a lot of those seem to be older accounts. When you start getting into the Kern County stuff, then yeah, Tehachapi area, I think they really start going out there and see for themselves type deals, and the Gorman area back up there. But so for us out here in the Antelope Valley, last episode we went through Lake Hughes area and back that way, and kind of worked our way towards Quartz Hill. So if we're going through and we're kind of noticing a certain pattern and a certain trend, but mind you, these sightings mostly happen in the 70s, and then we'll go into more detail about that, about the time frames. But they seem to be reported in the 2000s or late 90s for whatever reason. People have their own reasons why they wait so long to do things. So we're gonna go over those couple sightings that we had right there in the Quartz Hill area, and then a little bit west of that, and then we're gonna go over the Sandman. So the Mojave Sandman, and that's something that I kind of touched on in the last episode, where Jamar brought up the Sandman, and I didn't really want to touch too much on it, but this show we'll kind of get into it. We'll get into certain names, and then kind of carry over for the next show. But for this one in particular, we're to start working our way east of Lake Hughes area. So we're coming back towards Quartz Hill, coming over the hill. For those of you who don't live out here, we're in the Antelope Valley. So some of you heard of Palmdale or Lancaster. We're talking about Quartz Hill, which is further west of both those towns, and both towns butt up right to it. Quartz Hill is this like little ball, and on the west side of both those towns. Okay, so more towards the mountain areas, when you're looking west, back over that way. So it kind of makes sense that a lot of these sightings happen early on, before a lot of houses came out in that area, before there's a lot of buildup. So in the 70s, I think the high school was there, but certain houses around that area, certain things weren't really built up in that area. But anyways, going back to that story, so the first one we're going to get into right now is a story from the BFRO, and it happened between L10 and 50th West, around like 45th West, 50th West, around in those areas right there. And it was a guy and his cousin. So the guy did the report, it was him and his cousin. Apparently, they're out there chopping wood, and it was starting to get later. And when they went inside, they had a creepy feeling like something was watching them. So they go inside, do the thing, and I guess they look outside, and then they see something over there. So they take their flashlight and they shine it on it. And lo and behold, there's this creature, ape thing looking at them. So in the report, they shine the light on it, and they said that there was a 6-foot fence on that separated their neighbor's property with their property. And this thing was a lot taller than the 6-foot fence. Excuse me. So they can tell that, well, it was a lot bigger, but they shined it right in its face, and it just sit there and stared at them. So they said it had long, stringy hair, and they didn't take their time to actually sit there and watch it run off or whatever it did, and they looked it back inside, rightfully so. I think they were teenagers at the time, and ran back inside. Next day, they came out with their parents, and I guess there was deep impressions of where it was. They saw it standing in the ground and things like that. So, reading over this report, you kind of, it's like, man, that's close to home. That's starting to come down on the floor. So you're starting to see, or you're starting to hear about certain sightings. Now, this is just one account that you could actually find in the BFRO. And my thought is, like, how many more reports do people have that they're not coming clean with? Because there's a pattern here that we're starting to see just by little reports here and there of back then. Which, if you follow this trail, and Mr. Hucklebridge does a great job of getting a little snippets of Los Angeles Times. He looked up, and then there's a paper out here called the Lancaster Daily Gazette, I believe, that he went through, and he found these articles where this reporter is talking about our infamous AV Bigfoot. So it's not just it didn't just happen in Quartz Hill. It happened everywhere in the Antelope Valley, and that's where we're going to lead into. Is where we're going to get to. And why do some of these professionals think that this is happening? So that's pretty close. So some of you that live in Quartz Hill area, or you go to school at Quartz Hill High School, or the elementaries, or any of those things on there, right in your area, that Bigfoot used to hang out over there, or people used to see it anyways. Is that true or not? I don't know. I'm just letting you know what I found out. But like we always say, is one of these things is true, then it really did happen. Then it's real, and it's real. But yeah. So if you kind of look at the pattern of all the sightings that we talked about last episode in Lake Hughes area, and then Green Valley, and then coming back down, there's like a whole thing there. So it's kind of coming together, right? We're following the trail slowly, bits at a time, to try to make sure we understand are these plausible? Is it just real? Everything's plausible. I guess everything's possible, right? But did they really happen? We don't know. There's people having reports. So that was a really good report. Like I said, it happened in the 70s, and the gentleman reported it later on. And then, but apparently that wasn't just his first sighting. That was his only sighting at Quartz Hill area. But then when he moved to another place, he had some more, and it kind of gets on that. And we don't need to touch into that because that's not in our backyard. But moving on to this next one now. Now, this next one that's on here, a gentleman was driving on the 138. And the 138 is kind of weird because when you hear 138, there's two different spots that the 138 is. So you have the 138 that's back in Pure Blossom area. You know, you hear, oh, so 138, you go over the mountain, go back down, back to the 15 that way. And then you have the 138 that goes west through Gorman and goes into the 5. And then back that Gorman area is where a lot of people see, you know, they have their sightings. But I would imagine back the other way also, they would have sightings too, because all around the Antelope Valley, if you get off the floor, it's just mountains. Except when you go east. When you go east, it's desert. East, northeast, it's pure desert. Everybody knows that. That's when we drive to Vegas, you know, or Arizona. It's all desert. And but the surrounding areas, you know, is mountainous. You know, there's a lot of mountains out there, and then you have the Tehachapi's, and then it goes right up to Sierra Mountains up there. And you know, you go north of here, and you run right into, you know, all those places where people love to go fishing up there. They go hiking. I know a few people that go up there religiously and hike and stay the night, and they do fishing, some fly fishing and stuff. And you know, they do a lot of things, but then they never see anything. So maybe they did and they just didn't pay attention to it. But you know, you still have that stuff. But just to give you a surrounding area, why possibly in the AV here we could have these sightings, right? Because we have mountains, and if a Sasquatch is migrating, if it's that type of creature, which, you know what, seeing documentaries from the 70s, like, yeah, they tracked them from Southern California to Alaska and back, you know. So they have this migration pattern that they go through, and you know, some say it's dependent on the seasons or what's available. You know? So you have that. Now, getting back to the story, this gentleman was driving west, and he was on that 138 that way, and getting to, he says, around 280th west. And those of you that live out here know that's out there, boy. You know, you're going to start getting some more mountains areas. You know, there's that little lake out there. It escapes me at this time what it's called, but you know, there's lakes. You know, there's that lake out there. And then a buddy of mine saw an eagle out there just hanging out, which is weird, but he saw it. So we'll get him on the show to talk about it one day. But anyways, yeah. So going down 280th west, he's driving, and he says it's about between 200 west and 280th west, and he sees this thing run across him. And he said it was like it runs across the road, and it's about 7 feet or more. He saw it shoot across quickly, and he saw hair hanging off it, and runs into the desert. So I don't know if it runs left or right, but it shoots across long strides, and it just keeps going. And he was with somebody in the car, and they both saw it. So there was two people that saw it. It was later at night, yeah. And this happened around the 90s, I believe. 1993. And he reported it in 2010. So see, that's what I'm saying. There's like big gaps in between reporting and sightings in a lot of these cases, which is fine, you know. But I don't think there really was a platform like the BFRO to go and say, oh, I saw something, I saw this, I saw that. Right. So that was a couple. Now, out that way, I had a player of mine that those of you who don't know, I coached football for a little while, and one of my players, um, I think it was one night we were just messing around, and I coach football with Jamar also, and um, the the moon was out, and it was huge, huge, big like Halloween moon, right? Like from Hocus Pocus. My daughter calls it Hocus Pocus moon, and so it was coming up, and I'm like, wow, that thing's huge. I was like, man, it looks crazy looking at it. And, I had one of my players and he's looking at it and he's just kind of like giggles, like, okay. I was like, you know what that means, right? He's looking at me like, no. I was like, that means that Bigfoot's out tonight. He's looking at me like, what? Bigfoot's out tonight. He's like, yeah, man, you can see everything out there right now. And like, I expected him to go like, you're crazy. But he just gets serious and he goes, oh yeah, my my grandma actually saw one. And I was like, what? Wait, what? What? Grandma saw one. And I was like, wait, hold on. I was like, Jamar, come here. I'm like, all right, come here. Tell us that what your grandma saw one. It's like, yeah, my grandma saw one leaning in a big. She went to go get the mail. When the mail's down the road, and she comes back from the mail and sees this big old thing, just I guess leaning on the roof, right? Like its arms on the roof. He says, and it's looking in the window. And apparently they live out there. Like I don't know where, but they live out there, and I guess it's towards that area actually where people have seen these sightings, especially where this guy might have saw one somewhere over there. I'm not exactly too sure where, but um, and I was like, wow, no kidding. What'd she do? He's like, I think she just ran in the house and called the cops or something. Like she freaked out. Right. Well, I don't mean to laugh, but it's kind of like, what do? You know, you see a big old creature like looking in your window. Like, what do you do? I mean, you can't. I mean, first you freak out. I'm assuming, and then everything hits you like, oh, it's real. It's, that's crazy. So yeah, so there's another account that happened out there, or out here in this area, or whatever, however you want to say it. But trying to piece together, the trail that we're on, especially out here on the west side, right? So getting back to this story now, the man was driving, saw it run across, everything like that. He swears he saw it. Okay, good. So now it brings us to Sandman. And there's not a lot on Sandman. I guess there's a book that was written on it, kind of like some of the stuff I was researching. And um, there's a few shows. Um, a really good show that actually my father got me onto. And he brought this to me a while ago. And he's like, hey, Mike, you ever heard of Sandman? I'm like, no, what the heck is a Sandman? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, here, check it out. So he recorded it. He had it recorded because he knows I'm into that. And we watched it. And um, yeah, so on the show, it was called Into the Unknown. And the investigator that talked about the story is Ben Hansen. Ben Hansen is like, he's on UFO Witness and the Unknown. And I think we used to see him on like different ghost hunting ones, if I remember correctly, like back in the day. And he's really like, I don't know if he was ex FBI or whatever agent, but he seems kind of credible and his family's background too. So he knows what he's talking about. He's an investigator. He kind of like just brings us the stuff that he finds out, but he's deep in it. Like he finds stuff that's deep. So when Ben Hansen comes across something and he starts reporting on it, it's like, oh, he heard that from somebody that knows something, not like just surface investigation. Like, oh, I heard this, heard that. So he says this story uh, into the unknown, but because the guy was investigating Bigfoot, but Bigfoot stories that he hears that happen in the Mojave Desert, and I guess there's another base out here, like further out towards the east from us. So we have Edwards Air Force Base is like that's our Air Force Base, right outside of Roseman, you know, which is north of the Quartz Hill area, right? That's north of the Quartz Hill area and a little bit east. So it's northeast, and that's out there. And you guys know about Edwards Air Force Base and all the crazy stuffs and the happenings that, excuse me, that happen coming out of there. And there's a ton of stories that come out of there that we'll get into in another show. But this one was about the Sandman. So the Sandman has different names. There's the Yucca Man, the Cement Monster, and Sandman. And Sandman, well, I think there's a couple other ones too. Um, but it's regional, right? It's certain areas call it certain things that are in the desert because they associate it with certain things. And the one that I call Sandman out here is because that's what Ben Hansen said. He said this is a Sandman in this area. So they're in that show. They're investigating that area. So they, um, Ben Hansen says, well, there was a report or something that um, a Sandman in the 70s at Edwards Air Force Base was caught on camera at the base and was filmed getting into their underground tunnels or whatever they have underground, caverns or whatever they have in there. So, and then that's legit film. If you try to talk to people that work at Edwards Air Force Base and that been there for a long time, and you try to corroborate the story, they can't. I mean, I understand. Even though if they're retired, they can't say anything. And that's fine because that's what they know, and they're still protecting their themselves, and who knows how deep it runs and who knows what's what. But that was the story, and it's very interesting to hear that story coming out of this area because if you hear about a Sandman getting onto Edwards Air Force Base, which Roseman's still part of the Antelope Valley, so is Edwards Air Force Base, you kind of think, okay, so if these people are seeing things in the 70s, right? So a lot of these reports that we're going to get into happened in the 70s. It makes sense that something like that would happen. In another show, we're going to get into more sightings and stuff that happened more east. And now thinking about that and saying that out loud, that kind of that makes sense. That makes absolute sense. Because there's sightings way on the east side of the Antelope Valley. I mean, all the way to Lake LA, right? Lake LA all the way to Pier Blossom. So we'll get into those sightings and encounters too. But thinking about that out loud, that it makes sense that stuff would be out that area. Like if you're going to see it in one spot, you're probably going to see it all over the place. But it all happened around that same time. Very cool. So the Sandman is supposed to be a Mojave Bigfoot or Sasquatch or something might be completely different. Because when you hear the stories and accounts of a Sandman, it's attached to UFO sightings, or like if a UFO dropped it out of the sky, or they're by bases, primarily by Air Force bases. So then you think, what's the reason? What's the purpose of that? Why by the Air Force bases? Don't know. What's the connection? Is there a Sasquatch alien connection? There's documentaries on it. Absolutely. Because a lot of the things that you're going to hear and that we're going to go over, documentaries touch the fantastic sightings. I mean, things that you hear in movies and stuff, but it really happened to these people. if they're lying or they're not lying or they saw what they saw. But either case, there's fantastic sightings out there that, and people also say that, oh yeah, I saw it come out of a UFO. This light came down, this Sasquatch appeared and ran off into the woods. What's all that about? But there are documentaries about the alien and Bigfoot connection, and I've seen a couple of them. But when you start getting into um, documentaries, I mean, the best ones you're gonna find out there come from James Fox, right? So I think it's the phenomenon that he did, and then a couple other ones that were just ridiculously good, super good. And we're gonna get into some of that too. Jamar likes that, so when we get Jamar back on here, we'll be talking about the UFOs and the aliens and sightings and stuff and encounters and stuff like that. But right now I'm on the Bigfoot trail and trying to tell you guys what I found out, like what's going on, where's it going, where we're going with this, right? So that's what I got about Sandman, and it would make sense that you would see it on the floor. And it's just a different name. It's just, I mean, why not, right? Why not? They can come, they can do whatever they want. If it's really say if it's an ape or if it's a lost tribe of humans, which some Native Americans think that they are, a lost tribe of Native American or a different ape species, or I don't know, a remnant of Gigantopithecus, which Gigantopithecus that's real. They found the teeth and the jawbone, right, of a Gigantopithecus and reconstructed it and found out that this big old thing in Asia is over 10 feet tall, or was over 10 feet tall. And it existed around certain times. So a theory is that when the Native Americans crossed the land bridge in Alaska area, Russia to Alaska, when the Asians came across that and started coming down into North America, that the Gigantopithecus, followed them also, and followed them down, and as humans grew, so did they. Is that possible? I don't know. That's just a theory. These are all theories. We don't know. I mean, how would we know, right? But if you hear stories, of Native American stories, ancient times, you have drawings, you have paintings, and you have stories passed down from generation to generation. The retelling of those stories get blurred, or they get added onto. And it's that whole, we do in class, you say one word to one student, and then it hops all the way around, and by the time it gets back to you, it's an entire whole sentence that probably didn't even have anything to do with what you originally said that word. But in these contexts of these stories that come, that you're going to hear, some of it is in truth, or most of it in truth, and maybe the whole story is true. Don't know. But if they believe it, then that's is what it is. If their tribe believes it, or those people believe it, it is what it is. I mean, who are we to say that didn't happen, that didn't exist, that's not real, right? So just some interesting stuff. I think the Sandman one's really, really interesting, just because you don't really hear about the Sasquatch coming down onto the floor, onto the desert floor. Like I said, why not? If, they don't live out there, obviously. I mean, I don't know, maybe not, maybe not, but it would make sense if that's where they're walking through. If they're passing through, they got to go. So they're migrating through somewhere, and they know where certain things are at certain times of the year. What's their trek? Is their trek, from Alaska to Mexico and back? Is that what they do, or do they hang out around here and then go back up? We don't know, but there's theories out there, and some experts and that track Sasquatch and stuff like that. We'll get into these reports and a little bit more about it in the next episode. But that's what I got for you guys today. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or sightings or anything like that, um, you could email me at theoddstuffpodcast@yahoo.com. Theoddstuffpodcast@yahoo.com. And let me know some feedback, anything you have encountered or anything like that, and we'll get on it. All right. Remember, like and subscribe, and I'll see you back here next time. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.